Welcome to another episode of the Snap Fantasy Football Podcast, your weekly dose of news and advice that comes to your pocket every single Saturday. Holding it down, here we got Mac, Mark, Scott, and Landon. Enjoy today's show.
Hey, we're back with another episode of the Snap Fantasy Football Podcast. This is Wide Receivers Week, and we are talking about the former number one or potential dynasty wide receiver one, Juju Smith-Schuster. But things have changed. Before we continue, remember to like, subscribe, maybe put a comment. Are you in on Juju this year? Where would you draft him? We're going to talk about the good, the bad, and ugly on this episode of the Snap. First, I'm going to go after or start some statistics, easy for me to say, on Juju. In 2017, he averaged 11.61 yards per reception. 2018, it was 8.59, and 19 this past year was a career low for him at 7.77 yards per reception. He really disappointed fantasy owners who drafted him and really burned him, but burned them. He's only 23 years old. There's tons of upside, but there's a lot of question marks. Scotty, I'm going to start you off here. What are your thoughts on Juju for 2020?
You know, this is another tough one. We just finished up talking about Brandon Cooks, and I see a lot of similarities when you look at risk and rewards. They're obviously attached to very different players. Cooks, obviously, with the 5 concussions, we're worried about his health. With Juju, he could not be in better shape, better health, but he is tied to a quite ancient Ben Roethlisberger coming off essentially a missed season because of injury. That being said, I will always take a risk on a player I believe is super talented and highly athletic, and perhaps just in negative circumstances. There are a lot of unknowns when it comes to the upcoming Pittsburgh season. Big Ben is apparently back. For all we know, he says he's starting the season. He says that he'll be in good shape. If that's the case, and Big Ben is back and throwing the ball well, Juju could return amazing value. If that is not the case, and Ben doesn't make it to opening week, there's other scenarios that could play out. Cam Newton's currently a free agent. So is Winston. There are a lot of things that could happen that the Steelers could go out as a franchise and make happen to decide to give their elite weapons like Juju the actual option to succeed this season. So with that being said, there is risk all over this. And at a current ADP of 7, I think 704, or once again, around the Brandon Cooks level, lots of risk around him, but I'd say much more upside than a lot of other players at that level. So I'm high on him as just an uber talented player. And if you can get him in Dynasty, if it doesn't work out this season in Pittsburgh, another team could utilize this guy if they have a good, healthy quarterback. Mackenzie, what do you think?
Yeah, so from my perspective, I bought in on Juju last year because I definitely agree with you. The talent is there. I mean, I love this guy, especially coming out of college. Big, product out of USC. I love Juju, and I believed in his talent, especially when he shared the field with AB. We saw him, the biggest question with Juju, could he do it without AB by his side? And in a couple absences, no Antonio Brown on the field, Juju still had 100-yard performances. So I believed in him. I believed in the talent. I mean, Ben going down certainly changed the whole narrative. Duck Hodges and Mason Rudolph, very, very competent options, and exploring the possibility of a Jameis or a Cam coming to the team certainly changes my mindset to the whole situation. But I have to go in thinking, will he be with Ben? Most likely, yes. Hopefully he can return. I just have to reflect on this last season because the burns are still there. I still feel them. Juju Smith-Schuster, 7.7 fantasy points per week. He averaged Now, sorry, I just said he averaged 7.7 fantasy points per week. He had 6 games under 3 points. So when you talk about bust, Juju Smith-Schuster busted 50% of the time, and he had a couple 6 and 7 point outings. A season high 18.8 points. I mean, this is not what you expected out of Juju Smith-Schuster. Finished the wide receiver 66. Counterpart rookie Deontay Johnson finished as the wide receiver 41. I don't know, man. It's tough. I definitely believe in Juju, but I'm not willing to pay the price that Juju's going to cost. Looking right now, I mean, we look at an average draft position of 704 from Fantasy Football Calculator. If that were the case, I would certainly reach and take that risk, but it's going to be late second, early third at the worst for Juju come August and September. People aren't going to let him fall that far. So for me, I think this year he's just on my do not draft list. I'm just not willing to take the shot on Juju Smith-Schuster. I would rather go with like an undervalued guy like a Brandon Cooks potentially.
So there was a couple names there that I want to take the ball and run with here, because to me on this offense, there are other young, talented wide receivers besides Juju. And that concerns me a little bit, because we did see some good performances out of Deontay Johnson last year. And we've yet to see really much from James Washington, but he's another one who is young. He showed some promise and is going to be factored into that offense. They've also recently signed Eric Ebron, so there are certainly options for Ben to be throwing the ball to.
It's a good piece.
But after the down season that Juju had, it would take a lot for me to buy into him. And also, you're right, Mackenzie. I don't think there's any way that he's going to slide past like the late second or early third just because of his name value alone. I feel like there is no way he is ever going to make it to that mid-7th round ADP. If he did, absolutely, that is a snag. In Dynasty, we know that if we're going to hang on to him, he needs to have a fantastic season this year in order to stay with the Steelers organization. Otherwise, I think there's a good chance he'll be hitting free agency, and then who knows, the future could be a lot brighter if he ended up somewhere with a younger, maybe more dynamic quarterback. But right now, we're seeing a team that is expecting Ben Roethlisberger to come back in, to be as poignant as he was when Antonio Brown was on the field with them. And I just don't think that there's enough magic there for this Juju narrative to really come to life right away. I feel like there's just as much of a chance for Deontay Johnson and James Washington to come out of the gate and have high performances. But I don't know. There's not enough stock in Ben Roethlisberger for me and the rest of this offense to really buy into it. So yeah, I'm going to say I'm out on Juju Smith-Schuster. But if he ever fell to that late ADP and he was still available even in the 5th, 6th, that is when my eyes would open up for him. But sadly, they're not right now.
I mean, the other thing, too, here to note is that when Ben Roethlisberger was supporting 2 wide receiver ones in Antonio Brown and Juju Smith-Schuster, that season they threw, I think Ben threw for 629 attempts. Like, we're talking some crazy volume, and who knows what the status of that shoulder is coming back. So It's tough. Yes, there are some other talented options. I forgot to mention James Washington, shame on me. But that's another piece that guys are waiting for the breakout for him. So, yeah, I don't know. If there were to be a different option at quarterback, I think it'd be a little bit more reluctant to pull the trigger. But
what if there were?
I'm hands off. I'm hands off right now on Juju, and I hate to say it.
So, if I agree, Mac, if Big Ben does come back and healthy, we sure as hell know that he is not going to throw over 600 attempts. But you're right, Matt or Mark. What if James Winston went to Pittsburgh? How high would you have Juju? I would probably have him inside easily my top 10 wide receivers. Would you buy into that upside?
From a fantasy perspective, 100%.
Right.
Yeah, because he's going to throw regardless of picks or whatever. That's led to
Scotty,
him.
Mark, would you guys agree?
I agree. If Jameis Winston ended up on the Steelers, I think that is a buy Juju, buy any tight end or wide receiver on that Steelers team. You don't care if Jameis
Right.
gets the picks as long as your player gets the targets, right?
Absolutely right. You guys bring up some really good points. We, as fantasy players and dynasty players, we don't want that bright shining star that was Juju. We all loved his antics, his video games. We don't want that to burn out. But it's possible that he just shone too bright, too
early, too soon.
too early, too fast. But he is still young. We need to remember he's only 23 years old. Some rookies are even as young as he is, or maybe just a little bit younger. But so there's still upside. There's still learning to have. But we do know Mason Rudolph and Duck Hodges are not the answer, especially from the fantasy perspective. If you're still here, make sure to hit that like and subscribe button if you haven't already. Next, we are going to talk about Stephon Diggs, another guy changing. I have his Vikings jersey up on the wall. Unfortunately, I'm going to have to switch that out for a Bills jersey, but make sure to tune in a couple of days to check that one out. Thanks, guys.